Here is a question that almost nobody in personal finance ever asks out loud. How much is enough? Not how much do you want to save, and not how much should you be investing, and not what is the right percentage of your income to put away each month. How much, as a specific number, is the amount at which your financial life would feel genuinely settled and secure and complete. Claire spent 6 years inside a financial plan that had a retirement target and a savings rate and a monthly budget and an investment account that was growing on schedule. And for 6 years she never once felt financially secure. The plan was working and the numbers were moving in the right direction, and on paper everything looked like progress. But the feeling of security never arrived. And the reason it never arrived was something that took her a long time to understand, and something that most personal finance content never addresses because it does not fit neatly inside a spreadsheet. She had never calculated her enough number. She knew her savings target, and she knew her investment balance, and she knew her monthly contribution amount, but she had never sat down and asked, what is the actual number at which I would feel that my financial life is enough? Not more than enough, and not a stretch goal, and not a dream number. Enough. Today we are going to look at what the enough number actually is, and why most people never calculate it, and what happens to your entire relationship with money when you finally do. Stay with me, because this is not a budgeting video, and it is not about cutting expenses, and it is not about investing better. It is about a single missing calculation that changes everything that comes after it. Let us start with the thing that was quietly making Claire feel like she was failing even when she was succeeding. Most financial plans are built around targets that expand as your income grows. When Claire earned $30,000 a year, her savings target felt ambitious but reachable. When she earned $45,000, the target adjusted upward. When she earned $60,000, it adjusted again. Every time her income grew, her financial plan responded by deciding that more was now appropriate. More in the retirement account, and more in the emergency fund, and more in the investment portfolio, and more in the general category of financial security. And the feeling of enough never arrived, because the definition of enough was always set just beyond whatever she currently had. This is not a flaw in Claire specifically. It is a feature of how most financial planning works. The entire architecture of standard personal finance advice is built on the assumption that more is always better, and that the correct response to having more money is to want more money. And that assumption is never examined, because the entire industry around personal finance depends on people continuing to want more. More products and more services and more optimization and more complexity and more advice about how to get to a number that will itself be replaced by a larger number the moment it is reached. Claire noticed this pattern at 34 when she sat down and looked not at her financial plan but at her financial feelings. She had been on track with her plan for 6 years. Her savings rate was higher than the national average. Her investment account had grown consistently, and she had felt financially anxious for every single one of those 6 years. The plan had never once asked her what enough actually meant to her, and so the plan had never once been able to tell her whether she was close to it or far from it or already past it without knowing. So let us define the enough number properly, because it is not what most people assume when they first hear the concept. The enough number is not your retirement number, and it is not a savings target, and it is not a net worth goal. The enough number is the specific monthly cost of a life that genuinely meets your real needs and contains the things that actually matter to you, with nothing added for appearances and nothing included because someone at your level is supposed to have it. It is the cost of your life when your life is designed honestly rather than assembled by default. Claire did the calculation for the first time at 34, and the process took her one afternoon and a notebook. She wrote down every category of her monthly spending. Then she went through each category and asked one question: if I could design my life from a blank page, would this be in it? Not whether she could afford it, and not whether it was reasonable for someone her age. Would she choose it if she were choosing deliberately? Some things passed immediately. The small flat she genuinely loved, and the weekly food shop she planned carefully, and the one streaming service she actually used, and the gym she attended 3 times a week without fail. Other things did not pass. The second streaming service she had forgotten to cancel, and the monthly beauty box that arrived and sat unopened, and the car insurance on a car she used. Fewer than 4 days a month, and the dinner out every Friday that had become habit rather than something she genuinely looked forward to. When Claire added up only the things that passed the deliberate choice test, she had her enough number. It was £1,840 a month. Her actual monthly spending at the time was £2,610. The gap between those two numbers, £770 every month, was the cost of a life she had assembled by default rather than designed by choice. And that gap was the reason the feeling of enough had never arrived. She had been funding 2 lives simultaneously, the one she wanted and the one that had accumulated around her without her noticing. Now let us talk about why people never feel financially secure even when they are doing everything right. There is a well-documented pattern in human psychology that researchers call the arrival fallacy. The arrival fallacy is the belief that reaching a specific goal or number will produce a lasting feeling of satisfaction and security. You have almost certainly experienced it in a financial context. The belief that once you have saved a specific amount you will feel secure. Or once your salary reaches a certain level you will feel like you have made it. Or once the debt is paid off the financial anxiety will finally go away. Sometimes these milestones do produce a brief moment of relief. But the relief almost never lasts. And the reason it does not last is not a personal failure. It is a structural one. The target was set in relation to where you were not in relation to what you actually need. Claire had paid off her student loan at 29 and felt a genuine rush of relief for approximately 3 weeks. And then the financial anxiety returned because the plan had already identified the next target, build a 6-month emergency fund, and the feeling of security had never been connected to a specific definition of enough. It had been connected to a moving destination that by design could never be reached. The enough number breaks the arrival fallacy in a specific and practical way. Because it is not a moving target. It is a fixed and honest calculation of what your real life actually costs. And when you know that number, you can do something that no retirement target or savings percentage ever allows you to do. You can know whether you are there. Not almost there and not making progress toward it, but actually there, at the place where your financial life is genuinely enough for the life you have deliberately chosen. Let us now look at what the enough number does to the practical mathematics of financial planning, because this is where the concept goes from philosophical to genuinely useful. The standard framework for understanding how much you need to be financially independent is based on your annual spending. If you multiply your annual spending by 25, you get a rough figure for the amount that, invested and growing, could fund your lifestyle indefinitely, without running out. Most people apply this calculation to their current spending without ever questioning whether that spending reflects the life they actually want. Claire's current annual spending was £31,320. Multiplied by 25, that gives a financial independence target of £783,000. Her enough number, the annual cost of her genuinely chosen life, was £22,080. Multiplied by 25, that gives a financial independence target of £552,000. The gap between those two targets is £231,000. £231,000 that Claire did not need to accumulate. £231,000 worth of working years that could come off her timeline. The enough number did not require Claire to earn more or invest more cleverly or take more financial risk. It required her to be honest about what her life actually cost when it was designed on purpose rather than assembled by habit. And that honesty moved her financial independence date by years, not months. But here is the part of the enough number conversation that almost nobody in personal finance will talk about honestly. Calculating your enough number is the easy part. Living at your enough number is the hard part. Not because of discipline or deprivation, but because of other people. Claire's enough number was significantly lower than her actual spending, and most of the gap was not made up of things she had chosen. It was made up of things she was spending because of what other people at her level were spending. The neighborhood that matched her professional status rather than her genuine preference. The holidays posted on social media that communicated something about her life rather than genuinely being the kind of travel she found restorative. The clothes bought for work events and social occasions that required a version of her that cost more money than the version of her that was actually happy. None of this spending was dishonest or unusual. It was entirely normal. And that is exactly what makes it so expensive. Normal spending in a social environment is calibrated to the visible consumption of the people around you. And most people around you are also spending to match the visible consumption of the people around them. It is an expensive loop that nobody chose to enter and almost nobody examines. Claire began what she called a quiet exit from the loop. Not a dramatic announcement and not a public commitment to frugality. Just a series of private decisions, one at a time, to stop spending on the parts of her life that existed for an audience rather than for herself. The quiet exit was uncomfortable at first because some of those expenses were also social signals that she had come to rely on without realizing it. But the discomfort faded faster than she expected. And what replaced it was something she had not felt in 6 years of disciplined financial planning. It was the feeling of enough. So let us now walk through the exact process Claire used because it is simpler than most financial exercises and it requires nothing more than honesty and an afternoon. Step 1 is to list every category of your monthly spending without editing anything yet. The full picture first: housing and food and transport and subscriptions and clothing and social spending and everything else that leaves your account in a typical month. Step 2 is to go through each category and ask the one question that the whole exercise depends on. Would I choose this if I were designing my life from a blank page with no social expectations and no professional image to maintain and no habits carried over from a version of my life I have already outgrown? This question is harder than it sounds because many of the things you spend money on feel like genuine choices when they are actually defaults that have never been examined. The easiest way to test whether something is a genuine choice or a default is to ask, if this disappeared from my life tomorrow, would I actively choose to bring it back or would I quietly feel relieved? Step 3 is to add up only the things you would actively bring back. That total is your enough number. Step 4, and this is the step most people skip, is to sit with the number for a week before doing anything with it. Not to cut anything immediately and not to make any dramatic changes. Just to know the number and to let it show you the gap between the life you are funding and the life you have actually chosen. The gap itself is information. It tells you not how undisciplined you have been, but how much of your financial life has been running on autopilot rather than intention. And that information, when you have it clearly, changes every financial decision that follows. So here is the full picture of what the enough number reveals. It reveals that the financial anxiety most people carry is not a problem of not having enough money. It is a problem of not knowing what enough means. And when you do not know what enough means, your financial plan can never tell you whether you are close to it or at it or already past it. Claire did not change her income after she calculated her enough number. She did not discover a new investment strategy or find a smarter way to budget. She calculated a number that her 6 years of careful financial planning had never asked her to calculate. And that number, the honest cost of her genuinely chosen life, did more to change her relationship with money than every savings rate and every portfolio review and every financial goal she had set in the 6 years before it. The enough number does not tell you to want less. It tells you to want clearly. And wanting clearly is the foundation of every financial decision that actually moves you forward. This week, take one afternoon and do the calculation. List every category of your spending and go through each one with the single honest question. Would I choose this? Add up only the things you would choose. That is your enough number. And whatever the gap is between that number and what you are currently spending, that gap is not a failure. It is the beginning of a much more honest conversation with your own money. Share this with someone who has ever said they do not know where the money goes at the end of the month because the enough number is usually where the answer is hiding. I will see you in the next one.